Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial for the Agile Schedule Skills Practice Assignment. And I've put together a slide here that talks about how to go about developing an Agile schedule. It's pretty much based upon um, the way that scheduling is presented in the Layton book, with maybe an insight or two of my own thrown in. Okay, so in this tutorial, I'm going to use the example of the attendance reporting system that I used. I think I used this same example when I was doing the tutorial for Agile Scope. Okay, and uh, we'll get to the facts in a minute. Let's just talk about the process. So we're going to start with a backlog, right? When we did the Agile Scope, we did a product vision statement and a backlog. So the output of that is a backlog. So when we go to the schedule, we're going to start with that backlog. Okay. And pretty much that has just user stories on it. Okay. It doesn't have any other kind of tasks that have to be done that are more infrastructure oriented. Um, Creating a development and test environment, creating a production environment, uh, organizing training, all those kinds of things. And I'm going to show you in the course of this example a few things that might get added in what I call this step one, completing the backlog. Okay. So when we're done with that, we have a list of all the things that have to be done. Okay. Then we need to estimate all items on the backlog. Now, how we're going to do this? We're going to do this in the typical Agile way, the kind that's discussed, I think, quite well in the Layton book. Okay. Um, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Then we want to choose a sprint length. Okay. We're taking the Scrum approach to Agile. We're going to do sprints. Okay. Now, people typically say 1 to 4 weeks. Now, I'm going to tell you that very few things ever get done in 1 week. Okay. And when you give yourself 4 weeks per sprint, you're just really giving yourself too much time. The work is going to expand to fill the length of the sprint. And quite a few coaches in the Agile world like the length of sprint of 2 weeks. And I've come to like that. And that's what I'm going to tell you to use. Okay. Now, the next thing, number 4 here, is that we need to come up with an estimate of the velocity of the team. That is, how many points of work we're going to be able to get done, or in a kind of Agile parlance, burn down in a sprint. You know, is it going to be 10 points? Is it going to be 15? Is it going to be 20? Is it going to be 30? That has to do with a lot of things, but this number, this velocity that in points per sprint, is going to be unique to your team. Your team is going to have estimated the work in points, and points are arbitrary. We want them to be consistent within a team, but not necessarily consistent from team to team. Okay. So if we have a team that's been working for a long time, well, then we have a history of what our velocity is. And it's probably expressed in the number of points per sprint based upon the way that we do estimates with points, right? Oh, that's great. So we'll just take that value, whatever it is, and it'll become our initial estimate of the team velocity. If not, well, then we have to figure one out. Well, how would we figure that out? Well, I think we do the following thing. We look at the estimates that we've given to things, okay? And then we kind of ask ourselves, well, how many of these things that we have on our backlog, given the estimates that they have, how many do we think that the team could get done in the first 2 week sprint or an average 2 week sprint? Well, and then we just add up the points. That's the velocity, right? So, uh, you know, we're estimating. And one of the things that I like to say often is uh, estimating is structured guessing. Okay? There's nothing about estimating that says that we know the answer. Okay? But estimating is an alternative to wildly guessing. Okay? So, either we have a velocity that comes from history of a pre-existing team, or we kind of eyeball the backlog and go, well, I think here's what we think we can get done in an average sprint. And we just kind of figure that out. Well, that looks like 10 points. That looks like 20 points. That looks like 15 points. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to do at some point, now this could be number 5, this could be number 6, this could be number 8. We're going to choose a project duration. Maybe we've been given a project duration. Maybe somebody said, around here we do 2 week sprints and you guys get 10 of them. Well, then we know what the duration is. 10 sprints, 20 weeks. All right. Maybe this is a more democratic kind of organization where they go, well, we want you to look at this work and tell us how long you think the project should be. Well, then we're going to sort the backlog and we're going to see how many sprints it's going to take to do the project, and then we'll tell them. Okay. But the way that I'm going to have you sorting the backlog in this, and some of the annotations I'm going to have you put on it having to do with the schedule, you'll see what fits in. Okay, we're going to kind of sort this in order, and you're going to be able to see what fits into how many sprints. Okay, and then you have to decide, well, if you don't have that much time to get everything in, then what are we going to commit to in terms of the schedule? And then you'll be able to see from this kind of annotated backlog that we're going to produce in this exercise what fits in and what doesn't. And last, if you're going to create a product roadmap document, it's a matter of taking the stories and other items if you want to include them, but typically we just include user stories, and mapping them into which sprints they're going to be delivered in, and you're going to be able to tell that from the annotated backlog. All right. Okay, so we'll come back to this 7-part plan several times while I'm talking about this. All right. So in this student attendance system, the last time I showed it to you, we had a backlog, and these were the user stories, and I had given them a priority, which I think helps with scheduling. Roughly, the priority kind of has to do with the order that you'd like to do them in. And I gave everything an ID, okay? And that, the order in which you put things in the list is kind of a logical order. So what you're going to see is I'm going to sort this into priority order and then ID order. And that's going to help us get things into a pretty good order. So this is what we're going to start with. Okay. So that was item 1. Okay. Um, well, not all of item 1. Okay. Now, let's see. I've put together a template. Okay. And I'm going to make it available to you in the weekly schedule. Okay, and I've just taken the template that we were using for the backlog the last time we were using. I've added a couple of things. One is I've created a cell in which you can put the number of points per sprint that we're expecting. And I think when I do the when I do this, eventually I suggest that my team, the way I see it, my team thinks that they can do 15 points per sprint. So that's what I do. But what I do is I just take the backlog the way I had it, and I've added. I think I always had an estimate, but I've turned this into estimate in points to be clear. Cumulative points is just when you add up all the lines so far, how many points do you have? So for the first one, if it had 5 points, the cumulative points would be 5. And then if the second one had 5 points, then the cumulative points would be 10. So we see how many points cumulatively we have in the backlog. And then I put together a little calculation, a little formula that's not quite in this one, but it'll be in the template that you get. An estimated sprint position, which essentially says, well, based on the cumulative points so far, and how many points we think that we're going to be able to do per sprint, then which sprint do we think this is going to be in? The first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, or whatever. And for instance, if we're only expecting to have 4 sprints, okay, and we have a backlog that adds up and shows some of these things are in sprint 6 or 7, well, we know things that remain in sprint 6 or 7 are not going to get done. Okay, and that's agile scheduling. Okay, now we can argue with our sponsors and say we need a longer project and they're either going to give it to us or not. But based upon the amount of time the team's been given, we're going to be able to project what's going to fit in and what's not going to fit in. Okay. All right. So how do we go from here to a list in which we show other tasks? Okay, well, I have one for this. If I can just go find it. It's on another spreadsheet. Okay. And I'm going to show you some of this, but not all. So maybe I'll drag just the beginning of this over. How's that? Well, that didn't work. Okay, so what am I going to do? Well, for right now, I'm just going to take these things. I'm going to hide them. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what have I done? Well, the first thing I did is I took the priority and the ID, and I did a sort. I did an Excel sort in which I sorted first by priority and then by ID. Okay, and that sorted the tasks themselves into order. Okay, that was all the story tasks. And then I decided, well, here are the other things that need doing. This one, we needed to create a development server and test environment. So, I've done a lot of work with Django, and I teach a course at the iSchool IS439 where we develop an application with Django. So my first thought is, my team would build this with Django. So what I'm talking about here is creating a development server and test environment for Django. And I have a concept about that because I've worked with it. And then I've got a bunch of stories that I have to get done. And then some other things that I've added are create a production server and support environment, create training materials, administer training, and turn on the production system. Even when we're ready to go, something has to be done to actually turn it on, right? Okay, do I think this list is exhaustive? No, we could probably think of some more, okay? But the idea here is that just a list of user stories isn't enough, okay? Now, I think that all these things can be estimated just as they are right here. If you read through the Layton book, there's some talk there about the idea that we might want to break our stories down into tasks and then give the tasks an estimate. And I guess you could do that. That doesn't seem very agile to me. That seems kind of waterfall oriented. And I know they don't say that in every agile book. Okay. So my practice is going to be to do estimating on the level of the story and whatever kind of other task we put in here. I call these all infrastructure tasks. Could you use another word? Yeah, I think you could. Okay, they're all not started yet. Okay, now let's go back to our slide. Okay. Uh, so at this point, we've completed the backlog by adding items beyond user stories. That's done. Okay. 2, estimate all items on the backlog in points. Okay, well, I just want to review how we do that. Okay, so let's just pull over the Layton book, which I have an electronic copy of here. And we're looking at chapter 10, planning releases and sprints. And somewhere here they tell us that um, we're going to estimate these things in points. Okay, and in fact, they talk about points are going to be assigned based upon the Fibonacci number series. Okay, and that's a little bit hard to tell from this here, but when we get down a little farther, there's a picture of the poker cards and a list of the numbers. So the numbers in the Fibonacci number series, they go like this: 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. And what's interesting about this series for us, there's a lot of interesting things in the natural world which seem to model themselves after the Fibonacci number series. Okay, and you can do reading on that. I think it's something that you would enjoy. Okay, our interest is this: each number is approximately twice as big as the one before. Now, a 2 is twice as big as 1. 3, not quite twice as big. 5, not quite twice as big. 8, not quite twice as big. 13, not quite twice as big. We want to not get hung up on, is something 2 points or 2.1 points? Is it 5 points or 5.5 points. We estimate fairly roughly, okay? And we're not going to do it perfectly every time, but the thing is, it's pretty easy to decide, is it this size or nearly twice this size, okay? And this turns out to be easy for humans to choose from, okay? So could you choose just from the list of the numbers from the Fibonacci number series? Yeah, you could. Now, there's this really cool approach called Fibonacci estimation poker, where people in teams get these cards that you see here, and they look at something has to be estimated, and they all have a little uh, uh, hand of these cards, and they say, okay, now we're going to say what this is. And try not to influence each other. They all influence each other. They'll all show their cards at the same time. Okay? And one of the things that seems to happen from my experience is quite a few of the people will have the same card out. You know, a bunch of people will say, this is the 5. Okay, this is the 5. Maybe there's a person who has a 1 out and a person who has a 21 out. And the team will kind of say, well, tell me about your 21. And somebody might say, well, maybe I was on drugs. It's definitely not 21, but are you sure it's as small as the 5? I'm thinking it's a little bit bigger than a 5. And then the person who put out the 1 might say the same thing. And you talk back and forth and you decide, okay, are we going to go with 5? Are we going to go with 8? And then the team decides, whatever they decide. Do they decide on 5? Do they decide on 8? They decide, and then they move on to the next one. So the nature of this number series isn't that it's magical in some ways. It's that it's easy to decide between things that are either one size or nearly twice as big. Okay? And again, we're not going to do this perfectly. There's another approach to this that you can use, which is called t-shirt sizing. And that might be what we have back here. Yeah. So uh, what this team has done is that they've said, look, we're just going to decide whether this is an extra small, a small, a medium, a large, or an extra large, or maybe an extra, extra large. And they just take the Fibonacci numbers and they assign these. So these are t-shirt sizes, and then they have a way to convert them to points. And instead of using points directly, they use the t-shirt sizes and then they convert them to points. And again, t-shirts are pretty significantly different in size from each other. You know, we all know if we fit into, well, in my case, if I fit into an extra, extra large, if you give me a large, I can't barely get it on. Okay, so if you ask me, do I want a large or do I want an extra large or an extra, extra large, I'm going to say, well, give me an extra, extra large because the extra large is useless to me. Okay, so again, what we're trying to do is to come up with a point value that is easy to estimate. Okay, we're not trying to fine tune it down to 3.1 or 3.3. We're just taking these pretty big intervals and we're making our best guess. All right. So that's where the numbers come from. Okay. And all we're going to do is we're going to go through the backlog and we're going to work it out. Okay. So what did I do? Well, let's me see my version of this spreadsheet. Okay. And again, I think gonna have to unhide some things. So let's unhide these. Unhide. Okay. And what I did is I just gave these points. And what I did is I did it pretty quickly, and I did it in t-shirt sizing. Okay. So I think I had all the way to 2x. Okay. Yep. Yeah, I have it over here on my sheet. So I have an extra small at 1, a small at 2, a medium at 3, a large at 5, an extra large at 8, and an extra large at 13. So again, I used the t-shirt sizing approach. Okay. But the Fibonacci numbers on points. Okay. And so I've got a whole lot of 3s here. So 3s are mediums. Okay. And I've got some 5s, those are larges. So I'm thinking that a lot of these things where we say set up an instructor, set up a semester, this is kind of like add, change, delete instructor, add, change, delete semester. And again, I'm thinking ahead to the way we're really going to implement this. We're going to do it as a Django application. And there's a fair amount of work in these, but they're kind of repetitive, and you can clone one into the next. So I think I could do a whole series of them as a kind of a medium. Okay. What did I pick as a small? Well, the login. Okay. I didn't think that would be a lot of coding, but I thought it might have a fair amount of testing to make sure it worked. Uh, what I think was an extra small, 1, turn on the production system. What other things did I think were large? Well, creating the training materials and delivering the training. I thought they could take up a fair amount of effort. All right, that's how I came up with all of them. Okay, so I've got these sorted in order. I've given them points. Okay, now let's just go back and see where we are. Okay, um, that was number 2. Estimate all items on the backlog. 3, choose a sprint length. I always choose 2 weeks. It's worked well for me. It's worked well for my teams. Seems to be recommended by most of the Agile coaches, so that's what I go with. Uh, estimate initial team velocity in points per sprint. Um, I was originally thinking as high as 20, but the more I looked at what I thought we could get done in 2 weeks, I decided to go with 15. Okay. I figured it'd be me and a couple other people, and I went with 15. Okay. So again, we're going to find out our velocity as we work our way through. If we think it's 15 and it turns out to be 10, we're going to find out real fast. Okay. Uh, choose a project duration in sprints. Okay. So how many sprints have I got? In this case, I was open to kind of figuring out what fit, but I was thinking I was thinking certainly 3 months or less, more than a month, less than 3 months. So uh, 2 months is what, 8 weeks? That would be 4 sprints. Okay. 3 months is 12 weeks. That would be 6 sprints. So roughly, I'm thinking about 4-ish. I don't know. Okay, that's what I'm thinking. Nobody's telling me, Kevin, we're giving you 4 sprints and that's it, and you got to figure out the right stuff to get in here. Okay, and sort the backlog by item priority, which we've already done, to see which items fit into the project. Okay, well, let's just go back over here. So, uh, what I did is I came over here and I created a formula of cumulative points, and I'll leave that in my template that I give you. But the first one is just equal to the estimate in points, and then the second one is uh, the cumulative above it plus the estimate points to the left. So these add up, they come to about 60 points. Okay. And then I wanted to come up with a metric. Now, I haven't seen anybody do this. Okay. So this is complete Kevin invention. But what I wanted to say is, can we come up with a number that said, well, about what sprint would this be in, right? So here's what I did. Okay. I came up with a formula. Okay. And if you look up here, it's G5. That's uh, the cumulative points. Uh, the cumulative points divided by, now this A1 is our velocity, okay? And I put a $sign in front of the A and the 1 to say, as we copy this formula down, we don't want to refer to, we keep wanting to refer to this A1 in an absolute sense, and that's what the $signs do. And then this would have given me, like for the first one, it would have been 0.33. And I thought, what if we're in sprint 1, let's have a 1 here. So I just added 1. So I copied all this down, and you can see that the stuff that fits into sprint 1 has 1 point something. Then the stuff that fits into sprint 2 is 2 point something. The stuff that fits into sprint 3 is 3 point something. And the stuff that fits into sprint 4 is 4 point something. And okay, so that's 4 sprints, 8 weeks. Do I think that that passes the reasonability test? Yeah, I think it does. Oh, okay, so that's pretty good. Now, if somebody had imposed the 8-week schedule on us, uh, we could we could easily have a bunch of things down here past this point, and that would be indicating once we got into the fives. If we're not going to have a sprint 5, once we get into the fives in this little metric that I coined just an hour ago, estimated sprint position. Uh, if it's past the number of sprints that we've been allocated, that says this stuff is not fitting in. Okay. Now, then we've got 2 possibilities. Either we can work with our sponsors and funders to get more sprints, or we've got to start saying, do we need to prioritize these differently such that the list of things that do fit are the ones that we can live with, and the ones that go past that point are the ones that we can live without. Okay. So this is kind of different from the way that you would um, schedule a waterfall project, but has a lot of common elements, right? Some of the common elements are the estimates. Okay, in a waterfall project, we typically estimate in person days. Okay, here we're estimating in points. Okay, they're both pretty arbitrary. We're just trying to go back and tap into whatever experience the team has to figure out how big things are. The nice thing about the points that I really like about the Agile approach is um, provided that you've done a good job of sizing things. If it turns out that things take longer than you think, well, you don't have to go back and re-estimate things in terms of the person hours. You can leave the points the same if it turns out that your velocity is lower, like if your velocity here would go down to 11, uh, you would see these things would begin to shift out. Okay. So we'll put the velocity back to 15. And that is a kind of a nice thing about Agile scheduling. Now, one thing that I'm not going to show, but it's a thing that I'm going to put into the exercise for the challenge is turning this into a product roadmap. Okay, so the last thing I say here is translate these data into product roadmap format. And product roadmap format, if we go back to the Layton book, we've got a couple of versions what a product roadmap would look like in chapter 9. Okay, and the product roadmap is a schedule-based layout that shows when we're going to get certain features. Where is this? Here, right? And here they're doing it by quarter. I think the easiest way for a smaller project like ours is to just do it by sprint. Could we summarize it by quarter? Yeah, we could if that's what people wanted and we didn't want it to go on. But for our purposes, you can take the stories, okay, and you can figure out what sprint they fit into from this, and you can construct a product roadmap because the stories are the features. Okay, and you can just do sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4, whatever. Okay, so I'm not going to do that, but in the challenge, I'm going to leave that for you. Okay, so I'm gonna package up these templates and leave them for you in the weekly schedule for you to use. And that's going to be it for the tutorial. I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.